Hi, this is Stories About Speaking, and I have a guest today. I have Cami Orange here, and we've been Facebook friends for a few years, but we've never really stopped to have a proper conversation. And she has just published her first book. It's the first one, isn't it?
hmm
Called Say the Thing, and she's a boundary coach, and it's just so great that you're here. Thank you. Thank you for
Thank
taking time
you.
out.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. Now, I've read the book and you've got some of your story at the beginning of the book, but would you
Mhm.
mind introducing a little bit about your background and what your story is?
I would be happy to. Yes. So I have a really, I like to say, eclectic background. I grew up in a small cult subset of an extreme religion. And so I was taught that everybody has intuitive abilities. And so when I went out into the world at 17, I did what I thought, that's what I had the skills to do. And I worked as a psychic medium. And I realized as I was working with clients, helping them find closure after family members have died, that people have bad boundaries with the dead because they have bad boundaries with the living. And it was a very unique season. And I realized after I had some clients pay me a lot of money, that they could afford, they were very wealthy. But I did some more research and I found out that right when people are grieving, it's comparable to like Alzheimer's. Like your brain is
Okay.
really not in a good place. And so I realized I could not continue doing that professionally because I didn't want to risk accidentally taking advantage of somebody who didn't have, let's say, all of their cognitive
Yeah. Yeah.
faculties. Like if they paid me money they couldn't afford because they so desperately wanted the comfort I could give them, that
Totally.
that felt icky
Yeah.
to me. And so I retired as a psychic medium and I've worked other jobs and I've always been an entrepreneur. And then I worked as a wardrobe mentor. I kind of fell into it, a friend of a friend. And so I would go to people's homes and I would help them change the way they dress based on their own energy. And we would go through their closet and I'm there to sort through, their dresser drawers. And they're like, "Ugh, my mother-in-law keeps buying me clothes 2 sizes too small. What do I do? My husband doesn't like this color that I like to wear. What do I do?" And I realized, oh, people have weird boundaries around clothes. And so we would do a lot of boundary work. And then I suddenly unexpectedly got divorced. And so I had to shut down that business. But it had been going so well. Like I had clients in 10 countries. I got invited to speak in Budapest. I was the keynote speaker at a women's conference there. And so things were like growing, but then it didn't work out. And so I moved on and I worked for a marketing company for a while. And then we focused specifically on intuitive entrepreneurs. And so I helped them put their businesses online and I eventually became a business consultant, specifically working with them. And so I'm there to be like, okay, let's get your website put together. Let's get your, SMS marketing put together. And they're like, I have this client who texts me at like 11 o'clock at night. What do I do? Or I have, I'm trying to work during the day and my kids keep coming in. Like, how do I set a boundary around that? And so I did a lot of boundary work with my clients. And then in the middle of all of that, I had a client and I said, oh, I think the reason your business is so successful is you have this spiritual gift for connection, but you're not using it all the way. And she was like, hold up, what are you talking about? And I was like,
Mhm.
do you not know that? Like, because to me, I grew up with these are super normal. And I was like, how do you not know? How do you not know this? And so I made her like a little list, a spiritual gifts list. And she went home and she came back. She said, can you make one for my son? I said, sure. Can you make one for my friend? Sure. And I did one for the friend's husband. And then it started to snowball. And so I stopped being a business consultant and worked as a spiritual teacher. And I taught people about their spiritual gifts. And I did that business for, oh gosh, 3 years. And I ended up certifying and training 23 coaches in how to help people develop and discover their spiritual gifts.
Mhm.
And it was very successful. I made a full time living at it. And in the middle of all of that, I was in therapy and I had this therapy session where I realized I was trying to save people with my spiritual teacher business from the trauma I had gone through, the religious spiritual trauma I'd gone through as a child. And it was like this switch flipped, and I was like, I'm done. And so I sold that business to my students. And so they have continued that work. It still exists in the world. It's just not me anymore. And I was like, okay, 2020, so January 2020, I was going to get some, do some new things. And then, of course,
Yeah.
2020. So I kind of took a year to really ponder and look at my life. And I realized, when I was a psychic medium, I did boundary work. And when I was a wardrobe mentor, I did boundary work. And when I was a business consultant and spiritual teacher, I did a lot of boundary work. And I was like, I can take a hint. I'm going to do boundary work. And so in the beginning of 2021, I started my business as a boundary coach. And here we are a little over 3 years later. And I have a book and I have, 287,000 followers on TikTok. And I love it. Like I'm reaching people around the world with this work that I think was always at the core of what I always wanted to do. But I kind of took this long meandering path to get here.
As a lot of us do. Yeah. I'm really fascinated. Sorry, have you finished your story?
That's the story.
Yeah.
That's the whole story.
I'm trying to keep the questions in my head without interrupting you. I have a terrible habit of interrupting people when I'm excited. So what do I want to ask first? I do have a question about the boundary, but before, can I go back to the early childhood?
Of course.
Because you mention in your book about a classmate speaking to you, but at the same time, I was wondering if you were homeschooled. Were you homeschooled or were you going to a school?
So every July or so, my mom would sit us down. I'm one of 5 kids, and she would say, who wants to do what this year? And so some of us would go to school, some of us would stay home. So I've been homeschooled, public school, private school, charter school, Commonwealth school, unschooled.
Yeah, I think what was making me wonder is that when I was listening to your story, you were doing these businesses and you sounded very confident. And then you were like, and that was a success. And then I moved business and then that was a success. And I was like, what happened in her childhood that made her feel so certain that she could just keep reinventing herself? Or
Yeah. I was a heavily neglected child, and I think a side effect of that, I mean, there's lots of downsides to being neglected, obviously. In some ways it's really messy because you don't even know what you're missing. But I grew up fully aware of my own capacity. And I believe that confidence is our belief in our ability to figure things out. And I've had to figure things out on my own ever since I was little. And so I remember reading the Babysitter Club books and I was like, I can do that better. And so I created, my maiden name was Fletcher. And so I created the Fletcher Sister Sitter Service. And I analyzed our market and I was like, okay, people don't know how much to pay their babysitter. They always lose track of who the babysitter is. And so I made so many dollars per child per hour, put our little phone number on them. If they called, they could get me, they could get one of my sisters. And
how old were you when you did this?
Maybe 11.
Wow.
Okay. So I started working as a mother's helper when I was 8. This woman in our community needed babysitting. So she would be upstairs practicing her instrument, and 2 days a week I'd go over and entertain her. I was 8, and so her kids were 5, 3, and an infant downstairs and babysit them, but she was still home. And so working with people and it helps, I think, that I was a tall child,
that's
a very serious tall child. People thought I was older than I was. And I definitely got asked to babysit. And then I would get there and realize I'm like, I am 10, and this child is 9. But I never said anything and I just went with it. So
yeah, that's really interesting that you say about maybe it helps being tall. But it's also interesting to me how different it was from my childhood in that being shy, and I was comfortable speaking to family, but I would not have been going out selling myself. Makes it sound wrong. But you were presenting yourself to other people, or were they people in the community that you kind of knew anyway, or just strangers?
It was within our religious community, and so the stakes were not as high. And the culture that I was raised in, everybody within a certain neighborhood all goes to the same church. And so you do see those people, they do know who your family is. And so it was still a safe, they're not total strangers, right? I don't know them, but like they know who I am. They know who my parents are. If there's a problem, they know where I live, that type of thing. So I think that was a launching pad, but
Yeah.
also I I'll put it this way. I love to go to the library as a little kid. And so I would rollerblade down to the library in the morning and I would stay there all day and then come home in the evening. I would bring a lunch and sit outside. And I would have been like 9, 10, 11, 12 years old those summers. And so, I mean, I was gone all day, but I remember one day I was rollerblading to the library. And this is a little bit of a sad story, but I was rollerblading down the sidewalk and this woman backed out of her driveway and she hit me with her car. And she's like, oh my gosh, do you want me to call your mom? And I said, why?
Okay. Yeah.
Like, what would, like, why would we call my mom? Like, what would she, like, she's not going to come get me. Like, that was not even my thought. I got up, brushed myself off and went on my way. So
Hmm.
the one side effect of that childhood is like, I'm extremely confident and I can figure anything out. I'm
Yeah.
entirely sure I could build a rocket to the moon if I needed to. Like, I can figure anything out. But the
Yeah.
flip side is I've had to learn how to connect with people and allow them to support me and, build
Interesting.
community. And that was something I developed as an older adult because I was like, oh, being alone all the time is not what it's cracked up to be.
Yeah.
So it's now I have a really good balance and I have really close friends and community as well as that confidence. But I started with the one and moved into the other.
Yeah, that's interesting though, because what I'm hearing from when you're speaking is that you were building skills. And I'm kind of envious of, oh, wow, she was out selling herself and she was doing that. But there were other skills that you had to work on later in terms of that. Oh, okay, I can ask this person for help. I can do this. But that came later, where maybe I was doing that younger, but I
Mhm.
was not doing the confident, hey, I'm confident and competent and you can pay me to do this. I did not have that. So, but no, it's interesting, but it's still skill building, isn't it? It's not
Yeah.
just confidence, it is actually learning something. Um, anyway, I'm jumping to the next question. I'm excited. You use the word boundaries. When you were talking about your different jobs, you were saying I was helping them with boundaries. Did you have that language at the time? Did you know that it was, or was this the 2020 hindsight?
I think it was more the 2020 hindsight. I knew that people, I used words like, oh, people struggle to set limits with
Okay.
the dead, or people have people overstep, and intrude when they're trying to figure out what to wear. Because I don't think that's really anybody
Yeah.
else's business. You can wear what you want. Or as a business consultant, I was like, well, if people are rude, this is
Yeah.
what we say when people are rude. Like I had other terms for it. And then when I was a spiritual teacher, I had people who were like, well, I want to do energy work on my friend, but she told me not to. But can I still do that anyway? I said, no, no, you absolutely cannot.
Yeah.
That is a boundary. And so I taught classes specifically around energy and boundaries and spirituality. And that was when I first really started using that word. And so then in hindsight, when I was like, oh, this is a pattern, this has shown up
Yeah.
over and over again. And my specialty with boundaries is specifically around scripts and phrases because the philosophy of boundaries is, I have needs, you have needs. We coexist in this beautiful society and we get to accommodate each other.
Mhm.
But what do you actually say? How do you
Yeah.
actually do that? And so for years, I've been the person, people will text me and be like, hey, I have this situation with my husband. I don't know how to say this to him. I was like, oh, you could say this. And so I've written scripts for people to quit their jobs, have tough conversations with a partner, tell somebody that they don't want to go to an event. And so it just comes up a lot. And so that was a natural extension when I worked as a boundary coach is I do scripts. And so like I have flashcards that are 101
Yeah.
boundary phrases to help people develop their own boundary vocabulary.
Yeah, I think you said in the book that you'd been spending years gathering these phrases.
Mhm.
So as were you hearing them from other people or were you just thinking, no, I've got the phrase for that?
Some of them I would come across in reading a book, reading
Yeah.
a blog, somebody would say something, I'd be like, "Ooh, that's really good," and I
Ah,
I started collecting. So
yeah. I do that all the time. I love
I
that.
have
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of them. I still collect them. My collection
Yeah.
continues to grow because I just sometimes certain turns of phrase, I'm like, "Ooh,
Yeah.
that has good energy." So,
Yeah,
and then I just collect them.
yeah, sorry, I'm interrupting again. Sometimes it just resonates with you, doesn't it? It's like, oh,
Mhm.
that makes everything line up for me. That's a kind way to say it because, as say in the book, you're saying about being kind still, but you still want to be truthful.
Yeah.
And I think Martha Beck talks about integrity, like having integrity with yourself.
Mhm.
So yeah, so you've been gathering these different phrases. Was that before you were doing actually set yourself up as a boundary coach? You were
Oh,
starting to
yeah.
gather them? Yeah.
Yeah, I've collected them for years. So I'm autistic, and one of my autistic special interests is definitely psychosocial education
Okay.
and kind of like why do people do what they do. And so it's been an interesting side effect of being autistic is people are like, "Well, you don't seem autistic because you communicate." And I said, "Okay, but like the reason I communicate this way is because I've been studying
Yeah. Yeah.
holistic people,
Yeah.
non-autistic people for years." So the summer between I would have been 15 turning 16 that fall, and I'd gone to one school and then I was going to go to a new school. And at the school when I was in ninth grade, so 14, 15, I was like, oh, I didn't really have any friends. It wasn't a very successful social experience. And I was like, okay, I got to do this differently. And so I did what I always do and I went to the library. And so I read every single book on relationships in like the young adult section. And then I read every single book on relationships in the adult section. And then I collated all of the data. So if this book says these are the 5 things you have to do to be like successful and have friends, this one says these are the 2, and this one says these are the 10. But there's these 2 things that are on all of the lists. I made a list. And then I experimented and I practiced. And one of them is you learn everybody's name. So right when school started, I walked into the office and very audaciously asked the front desk
Yeah.
if
And
she
if I
would give
fail at
me,
that?
huh?
If I fail at names, do I fail completely? So
No, not at all. Not at all.
you'll let me off.
Um,
Yeah.
and so luckily it was a small school. There's only like
Okay.
110 kids, but I asked her for a list of everybody's names and she gave it to me.
Yeah.
I think just because I asked. And so I went home and I made flashcards. And so I had cards of their
Okay.
names. And then as I learned more about them, I like would keep track of things. And so I
Okay.
had like a little box of cards. And yeah, I learned everybody's names. And so if I'm like, hi, hi, people automatically knew my name
Mhm.
because I knew their name.
Yeah.
And just different techniques that some of them I practiced and I was like, this is stupid. And I'm not doing that again. One of them was, don't be angry like in a loud way. You have to be angry in like a, why are you such a bully? Don't treat me like that. And I
Okay.
tested it out and I went home and I remember writing in my journal being like, that was ineffective. We are not doing that again. Like, no. Pretending like I'm an airhead. No, we're
Yeah.
not doing that. And so so when I say this is my autistic special interest, like what that means is like with intensity and focus. And I have, read dozens and dozens, or probably at this point, hundreds of books and taking classes. And like, so for some people, they're like, well, you don't seem autistic. I'm like, I love people like other autistic people love trains, right? Where they can
Mhm.
tell you everything about every type of train. I can tell you everything about all the different types of people. And I have classifications and
Yeah.
documentation. And I use a lot of numbers. I make charts.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I must admit, for me, I'm not sure if I'm autistic. I haven't been officially assessed, but there are definitely things that resonate with me. And one of the things is I like to have things explained like explicitly. Just explain it. Just give me the language for it. And I think that was one of the things that when I was reading your book that resonated with me. It was like I do really like the first part where you give the bigger picture too. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think with the TikTok, you focus much more on the scripts. Does that sound
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
you've been really specific, as in say this in this situation, and I like it being really clear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do it that way for two reasons. Number one, short format content like
Yeah.
TikToks and, Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, they don't lend themselves to the deeper conversation of like, okay, let's talk about
Yeah.
why we say it this way versus other ways. And so I focus on scripts because for the second reason, it allows people to either have a quick yes or a quick no.
Yeah.
They'll
Yeah.
hear it and be like, ooh, I could say that. Or they'll hear it and be like, I would never say that.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
rarely do people have a neutral response to scripting. The ones that fascinate me, that I love, are people who are like, you don't have to say that, just tell them to fuck off. And I'm like, if the person who is watching this video needing this script was capable of saying that,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be watching a video on how to
Yeah.
learn boundary scripts. This is not for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. But it's still interesting. I do think it's really generous of you in a way that I have found it quite hard to transfer my work from working individually with people where you can get that conversation going and find out where they're at right now and what their needs are, to when you do a video and you're giving just a punchy answer, you're kind of guessing each time they're at this point in their life and I just need to give them this answer. But it feels very generous that you've just said, okay, I'm going to, I don't know, guess? Or is this because you've just got so much experience now?
It's not guessing. I have experience. So when I was a spiritual teacher, I had a Facebook group and I did Facebook Live
Okay.
every day for an hour, Monday through Friday, for about 5 or 6 months straight. And so I got a lot of practice being live on camera, and people would like time their breakfast or their lunch, their break around watching and being there live. And so I had people that showed up every day for months to watch my content. And I
Mm.
got to explore having big, deep, long conversations. And then I started making shorter videos and shorter videos. And
Okay.
there are, in my experience, there are three type of people that are there's people who don't know that they have a problem, like they have no idea, right?
Yeah.
They don't, we'll use boundaries, they don't know that they don't have boundaries, right? Like they just have no clue. There's people who they know that they have a problem, but they don't know what the solution is. They know that their
Hmm.
interpersonal relationships are not going the way they want, but they don't know that the solution is boundaries. And
Yeah.
then the third group is people, they know they have a problem, they know what the solution is, and they're trying to find the right
Okay.
version of that solution. And that's the group that I'm focused on. And so
Yeah.
I gear my work towards people who they know they need boundaries. That's why I'm a boundary coach. I use that
They know the
language.
word. Yeah.
And they're looking for boundaries. And then I'm like, the type of boundary work that I offer is scripts and phrases
Yeah.
specifically. And so
Yeah.
it's not a guess. I'm very consciously curating my content to attract people in this third group, mostly because I don't enjoy the first group. They don't
Okay.
know that what their problem is, and I'm not interested in making videos that are like, hey, do you have this happening in your life? You might have
Yeah.
a problem. Like, nobody wants to do that. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's super interesting with the scripts. We say I know people might want to listen to the scripts. We'll definitely have loads of time for that. But before we do that, earlier in the book, I've written down that you were saying about the 4 choices that
Mhm.
people have, and you say silence, extremes, direct communication, or indirect communication. And I just want to say that for me, seeing the big picture like that, seeing that these are the options, just makes my heart sing. Just like, sometimes when people say to me, you do it this way and this is the right way, and it feels odd or it feels off, and I'm thinking, I want to trust you, you're an expert, and you're doing really well, and I want to follow you, but it just feels really wrong. To give me that choice and say, yeah, for you, you can pick those options. But also, I think you were saying that sometimes you can pick between those options through your life as well. Sometimes you may choose that silence is the way forward, or direct communication, or maybe indirect. And I just wanted to say I really appreciated you just giving a choice. But is that because of autism, wanting to see the big picture and just have everything mapped out, do you think, and spot patterns? Or
I
or
think
just you?
um, the distillation and simplification of a huge pattern
Yeah,
is a combination of I have amazing pattern recognition skills. That's like my primary. People are like,
yeah,
"Are you autistic?" Pattern recognition is absolutely there. But also, I think you're not alone in saying, "Oh, I needed to know the why." You know, it's like Simon Sinek says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so
yeah,
if I'm saying, "Hey, here are phrases." People are like, "Well, why would I use that phrase?" And I'm like, "You
yeah,
don't have to. You
yeah,
have the power to choose in any situation. You could choose silence. You know,
yeah,
you can avoid what's going on, and that's okay. You could just
yeah,
be like, today is not the day. Or you can swing it out to an extreme. But I think most people don't want to choose the extreme, but they don't know what else to do. So giving those
yeah,
other two choices of indirect and direct communication, I think creates a lot of space for people to do what they, speaking intuitively, what they feel energetically, intuitively is best. It's what you just said, where people are like, this is what you should do. And you're like, ooh, that doesn't feel right.
yeah.
And
I
if it
just
doesn't feel
like
right,
it that it
don't
was
do it.
named. I like it when people give language to something. It's like, yes, you have silence. I would have guessed at direct communication or silence. And I think I'd have struggled to say indirect, but I wouldn't have popped extremes in there. But obviously, extremes, as in getting suddenly angry or something like that, that is an option. But I don't think I'd have stopped and thought about it and named it. And I thought, oh, okay, that's really useful to put it in those categories. Because actually, when you hear those categories, I'm thinking, I don't want that one.
Yeah.
And that makes it a little bit easier to, you know, go between the two. Well,
Yeah.
go between the four of them. So before we do scripts, is there anything that you wanted to say about boundaries or that earlier section of the book that I haven't
I
covered?
think so. When we had talked before about kind of the vision for this, you had said, like, how did you get here? Like, what was your
Yeah,
journey to, to speaking and to telling your story? And so I wanted to make sure I addressed that. And so I call it the ABCCDE. And so if you think through my story, ABCCDE is saying, I started here. I started as a psychic medium and I ended up as a boundary coach. Those are, that doesn't seem like a straightforward path. And so when I talk about this, it's like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, I do A, B, and C. And then as you go forward, A maybe drops off for a reason, B stops, but C stays. And
yeah,
then later you're like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I do C, D, and E. And then
yeah,
eventually you end up at like E, like, spiritual teacher, boundary coach. Like it's this beautiful journey. And so often I think people who have a story and have a message, they're like, oh, I want to know what E is. And maybe it's E, F, and G. Like, I don't know.
yeah,
People's lives are constantly evolving. I might not be a boundary coach forever. I'm 34. Who knows where life will take me? But
yeah,
I will continue to have something to say. I have a story. I have a message. And most importantly, I think I have an energy. And so the idea that you have to have it all figured out before you begin is so limiting. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to be a psychic medium. I'm going to be a wardrobe mentor. I'm going to be, it's okay that I have constantly reinvented myself, a business consultant and a spiritual teacher and now a boundary coach. Like that's a very eclectic it's an
yeah,
eclectic series of events.
yeah. And I hear you because a lot of people want to know, their purpose or what they're supposed to be doing. And it's like, we're all figuring this out. Like,
Yeah.
and it's interesting, you mentioned about, oh, helping people with boundaries, in each of those different jobs. But that's hindsight. In hindsight, you're saying, oh, yes, I'm spotting that element. But in another 10 years, there may be a different element of all of those jobs that you connect the dots to,
Yeah.
that you see is more important. But I'm sure that the boundary work is going to be important. I think that's one of the things that I made quite a mistake with is that a lot of the different jobs that I did, I felt like, oh, that was a waste of time. And now I've got to reinvent myself and do something else. And yet it's never a waste of time because you're building skills and you're meeting people and you just don't know how the dots are going to connect later, do you?
Yeah. Yep.
So in fact, one of my questions here was I've put here, you the right person to do. Is there a part of your personality or character that made you say, "Oh, I'm the right person to do this"? As in, I'm just trying to think how to word this because you've had these different experiences and you've found yourself automatically collecting these scripts. But is
Mhm.
it because you just were naturally good at that? Or is it because you struggled with that? Or,
So I think in the extreme religion that I was raised in, I was taught that women should never say no to men because men have a special power from God that makes them make better decisions than women. So we should just always listen to what they say.
okay.
And as I grew up and went out into the world and was like, oh, if you never say no to men, bad things happen. And I didn't like those things. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to do this differently. And being able to, how do I say this? I like your question of, am I the right person? Like, I believe as an entrepreneur, and I've been a lifelong entrepreneur, like, entrepreneurs are problem solvers. And there are problems in the world that I was like, hey, I cannot solve all the problems in the world. So I'm going to pick one and do that. As a psychic medium, my focus was people whose family members had died by suicide. They didn't have closure. That was the problem I was trying to solve.
Yeah.
As a wardrobe mentor, people were dressing for other people's expectations instead of their own joy. That was the problem I was solving.
Yeah.
As a spiritual teacher, people don't know that they're magic. They don't know that they're powerful. And that was the problem I was solving. And as a boundary coach, people don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Jerks will just like say stuff.
Yeah.
People who don't care about other people, they will just say whatever they want. And kind, lovely people are like, oh, I don't want to. I don't want to say anything. And so that is the problem I am solving. And
Yeah.
I'm the right person to solve that because I am solving it.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I
I
chose
think
in. There's a
I don't
power
know
in it.
whether it came across like I was querying whether you're the right person. The reason I
No,
asked
no,
it
no. I
is
know.
because I have asked myself, am I the right person to do this? Because I struggle still with this and I'm having to explain to myself, you're the right person for the type of listener that is struggling because I'm not the super polished, high, I don't know, slick speaker which I would associate with being super professional, but that might turn off the type of person that I'm trying to attract. I'm trying to attract somebody who does have those different doubts about the way they're speaking and expressing themselves. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was thinking is, did
Yeah.
you ever ask yourself, am I the right person?
I I'm immensely qualified for everything I do because I'm the one that chose to do it.
Yeah.
Like I think it's part of my spiritual beliefs. Like I believe in a sentient universe. The universe would not have written it on my heart to do this work if I was
Right.
not the person to do this thing. And so and I knew that you weren't asking am I the right person?
Yeah.
You're
It
talking in
came
theory.
out
I'm not
there.
offended. But what you said made me think when I was a business consultant, I had a client who for a while, I was a mobile business consultant where I would go and stay in the home of my client for like a 2 week, 3 week, 6 week stretch to do like all of their business stuff. And then I would move on to somebody else's house. It was a really interesting adventure. But she was very polished. She still is a very polished, classy lady. And she asked me once, she's like, do you think when you're more successful that you will, and I was like, what is this? She's waving at my face and my clothes. And she's like,
Oh,
just
okay.
look better. And I said, no.
Mm.
No, this is it.
Yeah.
And I was asked recently that my sister and I were chatting. She's like, well, if your book is successful and you get asked to be on like television, what are you going to wear? And I said, the same thing that I'm wearing right now. And she's like, tank tops and overalls and sneakers? Yes, because
Yes.
this is who I am. And if people cannot hear the words that I am saying because I'm not wearing a suit and heels, then that is their loss.
Yeah.
Like, the people who are my people will find me because I am me.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely lost track of that sometimes, listening to experts and thinking, "Oh, this is the right way to do it." And then I lose myself in that, and then I have to go, "Okay, no, that didn't work for me."
Yeah.
And just but I think in a way that's why it's so important to have different representation and see people out there. And YouTube is amazing for that, and obviously TikTok and seeing different people. Do you want to talk about scripts? Do you want to talk about scripts?
I would
I
love to talk about scripts.
Do you know what? What's so fascinating? Thank you for showing the book. Thank you for showing the book. And I will later. I'll ask you how it's doing, but at the moment we'll talk about scripts. What was so fascinating is how you break it. So you break it down into all the different situations. But I was reading it and I was thinking, really, do people say this stuff? I mean, it's shocking what people say.
Mhm.
Are you thinking that? Is this strangers that come up to you and talk about your clothes and different things like that? Or your anything about your appearance or
Yeah. I I think humans are amazing. Let's start with that. I love
Mhm.
love 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 humans. I think that we're magical and wonderful, and we are the dominant collaborative species on the planet. And so, if there's certain species of bugs that were bigger, they would probably rule the world, but they aren't. And so here we are. And so this constant exchange of, are we in the group? Are we out of the group? I want to be an individual and unique, but I also want to belong. And it's this push pull dynamic of humanity. And so people constantly will say things, strangers, family, friends, partners, people will say stuff that sometimes you're like, I cannot believe they just said that. Because I think on a fundamental level, like almost an evolutionary level, they're asking, are we the same? Or am I
Mhm.
unique from you? Are you unique? Like, we're constantly questioning our space and our place in the collective. And so the scripts, the second half of the book, the main chunk of the book is organized by 25 different topics of things that people, bodies and
Yeah.
pregnancy and disability
Oh,
and all
yeah.
these different
Yeah.
subjects.
Yeah.
And it's organized that way because I sent out emails to people and I said, okay, I'm writing this book. What are the things people say to you? And so a lot of them are submissions from clients or students or people who follow my work, and they said they sent them in and I put them in the book and I said, okay, if they say this, you can say that.
Yeah.
And one that comes up is because I don't have experience with speech impediments, with stuttering.
Mhm.
And as I thought about it, I was like, I don't think I have worked with clients with that, but like, obviously, this is a thing that exists in the world. And so I sent out a request and people sent them back. And one of the main things that comes back is if you have a speech impediment, people assume if you are not articulate and vocal, that you are not intelligent or
Yeah.
that you have a low mental capacity. And so I wrote this, part in the book, and there's responses for that. And then just this last 2 weeks, my partner is a middle school teacher. So like 14, 15 year olds, 13, 14, 15 year olds. And they were in charge of an event and I was there volunteering. And there is a young man who has a speech impediment. And I'm watching people talk to him as if he was an infant. He's
Yeah.
just he's just a kid. He's
Yeah.
just a 13, 14-year-old boy. He's not stupid. He just isn't, he can barely talk. And so I was like, oh, I get to use some of my phrases
Yeah.
from my own book. And so it's the things that were like, oh, I don't have experience with that. Does that really happen? Yes. People who have experience with
Yeah.
that, they write in and say, oh my gosh, that happens to me all the time. So that's where they
Yeah.
come from, is from my clients.
Yeah. Because some of the things I found, sometimes people say something that's quite shocking to me, but if they're a stranger, and certainly if it's kind of online stuff, it's really easy to know what to do because you just say, "I'll block you." This isn't a conversation. But when it's somebody you know and you're thinking, "Is this awkward?" and especially if the relationship matters to you and you're thinking, "You may not be super close to me, but I still want to have a relationship with you, but
Yeah.
I don't want to be crushed every time." I speak to you or meet you. So
Yeah.
so yeah, and if anybody is listening, I don't know who's listening, but I just wanted to be really clear that Cami is giving the exact words to say, like the whole phrase. When she's saying she's giving a script, it's not saying just be confident or it's not doing it in an inspirational way. It's doing it in a super concrete, these are the words to say, and you definitely have a sense of the the emotion behind it about whether this is being very direct or this is being more indirect. And I think I do have some people who've got English as a second language, and I think that's going to be really useful to have that feedback of this is direct, but it's still being kind, and it's just communicating the boundaries really simply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have found that um sometimes people are like, "Oh, well, we could say it indirectly." And I said, "Well, if indirect was working, we wouldn't be having this situation."
Yeah. Yeah.
If indirect of like, you know, giving a verbal or a visual cue that I'm uncomfortable or I'm trying to like, "Oh, well, oh, by the way," and trying to change the subject. If that fixed it,
Yeah.
then I wouldn't need to say whatever the script is. And I one of the stories I tell in the book is about a time I was at a barbecue. And so I'm a fat person, I'm a happy fat person, like I'm really comfortable with that. And I was at this backyard barbecue and I was eating food and I'd gotten some potato salad. And this woman that I didn't know sat down and she's sitting in a little folding chair across
I'm
from
just
me and she
dreading
goes,
this already, but yeah, okay. You can see me cringe, can't you? I'm like, oh. I'm
she
trying to
goes,
look neutral, but I'm my whole body. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
and she goes, "Are you sure you should be eating that?" And I was like, why? Like, I thought little kids had put their fingers in it and she
Oh,
saw and was
okay.
trying to warn me, or like bugs or dirt had fallen in it. Like, there was something wrong with the food. And she looks me up and down and goes, it's fattening. And I was like, what is happening right now? And I started to laugh really hard when she said that because it was so shocking, like to almost
Yeah,
cliche. Like, you're a stranger trying to police my body? Like, no,
yeah.
thank you. That's not appropriate. No, thank you. And I laughed so hard she got up and walked away because she
Okay.
felt so uncomfortable. And I wasn't trying to make her uncomfortable. I
Yeah,
just was like, I cannot believe you just said that. That was so deeply
yeah.
inappropriate.
But I think the word you use there about shock is super interesting, because one of the problems is it for a little while you are in shock about and it's like your brain stops working. And and in a way that's the reason that you read these books in advance of the situation and you have some scripts in mind, because you're not thinking, you're not it is so shocking. I mean, it's interesting that you laugh, but if you hadn't laughed, what would you have said? What would you say to people they could say?
I mean, we can definitely turn to that page in the book. So, fatness in food, page 133. If they say, you know, don't you know that being fat will kill you? Like, you can say, I'm not interested in your thoughts about my body or my health. Or this one was a submission. I got you a gym membership for your birthday. And I was like, oh no, I wish you had checked with me first. That's not something I'm going to use, so I hope you're able to get a refund.
That's super good. Yeah, that's super good.
So, this one was also a submission from a friend of mine. It says, I brought celery sticks for you and cupcakes for everyone else.
I'm just dying inside.
But like
Even if I
this is
heard
a
this
real,
conversation, I'd be
yeah,
so
it's a
embarrassed
real
for
thing
them.
that happened to this
Yeah,
person, and they were so uncomfortable they didn't know what to say. And so and I usually try to give two options. So this one,
yeah.
it says, I wouldn't want anyone to feel awkward that I got celery and they didn't, so I'll have a cupcake too. But thanks for making a special effort for me.
A little bit
And
shocked. Yeah, a little bit of sass. A little bit of sass going on. Yeah.
or that's odd. Are you trying to restrict what I'm eating when that's not something I ever asked you to do?
Yeah.
So um it's so interesting to me as a fat person because people do make comments
Yeah.
like constantly. And it's, it can be family, it can be friends, it can be strangers, it's, people in person, people online. And it's just a thing that happens. And so what I like about the scripts is even if you've had a situation happen where somebody said something and you froze and you didn't know what to say in
Yeah.
the moment, you were shocked, it's going to happen again. Like it's going
Yeah.
like inevitably. As a fat person, I will get more comments on that. And so I have a vocabulary now of like, "Oh, please don't comment on my body." I think to that lady at the barbecue I said something like, "Please don't comment on people," or "We don't comment on people's bodies anymore. That's inappropriate." And
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe that wasn't the best thing to say in that moment, but it was like, I am not like transgressing the social norms here. You are. We
Yeah.
don't like, it is not okay to comment on people's bodies like that. Like, you've overstepped. And like I said, the evolutionary, are we part of the group or are we not part of the group? I want to be unique, I want to belong. And so I said, "Oh, your behavior is pushing you out of the group. Don't do that. Like, don't do that because then you won't be part of the group. And so if you change your behavior, you're welcome to come back." And that's why I think being kind is so important, because I'm not trying to say, "Hey, you've broken the rules so much we never want to see you again." I'm saying, that was a little too far. Like,
Yeah.
change your
I
behavior and come back. You're still welcome here, but you just can't
yeah.
say that
Yeah.
anymore.
I think I probably overthink the kindness thing. And I'm thinking I want to be kind to them. And as I say, I'm overthinking it. And I feel like I end up putting their needs above my boundaries. Does that
Mm,
make sense?
yeah.
And and if there's people who are listening that know me, I will also say I get this wrong loads, but I internally I am really, really thinking about being kind to them, and I don't want them, if it's just a faux pas, if it's just they said something and I don't know, maybe in their circle and their world that's something that's normal, but in my world it's not. I don't I don't want to shame them or anything for that.
Yeah.
But as I say, I am working this out. That's why, as I say, the scripts were really useful to hear. Um, I was going to move on to the fertility question because I haven't been able to have children. I've adopted my daughter. So the question about fertility, I remember having fertility treatment and everybody saying to me, you just need to relax and go on holiday. And I'm thinking, this is a really personal, like medical issue. And part of me felt like it isn't really a secret in terms of I kind of don't mind sharing that there's reasons why I can't have a child, but at the same time that's kind of oversharing and you know you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
just but one of the things I was thinking is in situations like that when people ask about fertility, it's part of the problem was I hadn't decided how much I wanted to share.
Mm,
Does that make sense? And so I'm
yeah.
trying to judge the social situation every single time of, is this too much? Is this appropriate? But obviously, again, I'm overthinking. Help me out with this. If people are overthinking, like, I suppose the fact that I'm overthinking it means that I've got some doubts or something about oversharing that much.
I think that for me, I interpret people who they put a lot of thought into their interactions with others, that you have a very generous heart, that you care about people and you don't want them to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And
I want
so,
to connect. I want to
yeah,
connect. And so I want to share information. At the same time, I'm like, kind of private.
yeah, I I think what's interesting about touchy topics like fertility is there is no one answer. Like, the boundaries that one person might set for how much they will or won't share with people could be different than yours, and
Yeah.
yours might change from day to day. So
Yeah.
you didn't do anything wrong. I want to start with that. Like, whether you shared too much or too little, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I the overthinking is often happens when we don't know what to say. And so if you pick like a standard answer that will satisfy 70% of people,
Hmm.
and then you move on, and then the 30% who are like, well, but why, but I
Yeah.
have more questions, then you can decide, oh, do I has this person earned the right to hear my story? Do I want to
Yeah.
share
That's a
more with
good.
them?
Yeah.
Are we in a situation where it's appropriate to do that? But having like a short answer pre-prepared really, really helps, because most people are just asking like, oh, do you have kids? And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't. And they're like,
No.
"Oh, well, I hope you do." Like, and
Yeah.
it's not, they're not trying to get into a conversation about fertility.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my daughter is adopted, so some people ask me about adoption, and one of the issues for me is a lot of the story and the information about adoption is her story to decide whether she shares or not. It's not really for me to be sharing right now. But
Yeah,
some people are just being polite or just a little bit curious and asking about the adoption process, for example.
yeah.
And, you know, some people maybe it may be that they see almost like an opportunity that they've been curious about adoption and they really would like to ask some
Yeah.
specific questions. So you're trying to separate those two people and, you know,
I think in that case, I would have two responses. One that is like your short standard, 70% of people are going to be good with, like, oh, yeah, my daughter's adopted. It's been a really positive experience. Like,
yeah,
that's it.
yeah,
And then for the other ones, you're like, oh, the resource that I really like about adoption is such and such book, or
yeah.
such and such channel on YouTube, or such, like, somewhere that's not you being the source of all of that.
Okay.
And if they're genuinely curious, I mean, you can say, oh, after you read that book, if you want to discuss it, I would love to. But like, they have to go do their homework.
Yeah,
You are not the
that's
fount
a
of
good
all
thing.
adoption information. You don't owe them
Yeah.
an education on this thing. We exist in the age
Uh,
of the internet. They can Google it.
I had never considered that. That's so interesting. And that's why it's interesting when you actually come back with a script, because instead of it being a general um, you have a boundary in place and you must, instead of being more general and kind of inspirational in nature, you're being really specific and saying, you could say this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a positive experience. Or yeah, if you want to know more about adoption, I found a great book. I can send you the link to it. Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
That's really good. I think that's the value of the scripts.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting we were talking about adoption, because when I was putting the book together, in that chapter that's about fertility, infertility, children, child free, all of that, I had a whole section on adoption that my editor took out because it's so
Okay.
controversial, and because it's some of the views I have about adoption, specifically around adoption trauma, and that, is very touchy. And so
Yeah.
my editor was very gracious and said, okay, we want people to be able to benefit from the book without it like really upsetting them. And
Okay.
this is such a polarizing issue. So adoption and then also abortion didn't make it into the book, because I have really
Okay.
strong opinions on both of those things. And nope,
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
scripts in this book, but I do make videos and stuff about that kind of thing. So it's
Yeah.
not a taboo topic. I'm happy to discuss it, but those are not specifically in the book.
Yeah. But I still think it's really interesting. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of censoring and not talking about stuff, because I think for me talking is so linked with thinking, is that sometimes you have to talk it through to know what you're thinking and feeling, and then it's useful even if somebody else is talking about it in a kind of a clumsy way. It's like we're working it out, and it's one of the things that I think about. I want people to feel that they can improve their skills in speaking and expressing themselves. But the internet and a lot of places are quite unforgiving about your first time talking about something. Um, How have you found that? Do you feel that by the time you turn up in video, you're very certain about how you're expressing an idea, or are you still thinking and working it through?
I think there are definitely videos and things I've made that I was like, this is going to be great. And then I put it out in the world, and the response is nope, swing and a miss. It didn't work. And whatever was in my head did not come through. And so the value I have is how do I say this? I've created a large volume of work in my life. And so I know what it looks like when I create something and it like resonates with people. And I know
Okay.
what it looks like when I create something and it's like, "Ugh," and it flops. And
Do
it
you know
helps
that?
inform my thinking.
Yeah, sorry, but do you know at the moment you've created it, or once it's out in the world, do you know?
I think that I know things,
Yeah.
and I feel, very confident in what I say. And if I'm not, I will say, hey, I'm not sure about this. This
Okay.
is where my initial thoughts, and I will
Yeah.
clarify my stance on it. So I'm really, really big on like bookending, um, or
Explain.
pre-framing, however you
Okay.
want to
Yeah.
phrase that.
Yeah.
So if, let's say, I'm sharing a post on Facebook, and to me it's good news. I've had this happen where I shared what I thought was good news, and I got comments like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Oh, I hope
Hmm.
that you get better." And their framing was not my framing.
Yeah.
And so I've learned that I'm like, "Hey, I have good news. This is the
Yeah.
emotional response I'm looking for." I mean, I don't use that phrase, but hey, I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
good news. Please celebrate with me. And then I say my news,
Yeah.
and then people respond in the way I'm looking for. So if I'm saying, hey, I'm not sure about this, I'm still figuring it out, I would like your thoughts, then I say that. If I'm saying, this is what I think about this, then that's what I say. And so I try to always contextualize or frame it for people so they know where I'm coming from when I'm sharing that information. How confident or how sure I am, or if I'm looking for celebration or commiseration.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, before I want to ask you how the book is doing and what's next and different things, but I have to pick your brains on something because of a script. My daughter is black. She's from Ethiopia. She has a beautiful afro, and when we
Mhm.
go to the supermarket, we normally get somebody, typically an older lady, who says, "Your hair is so beautiful," and before you know it, she's reaching out to touch her hair. And
Yep.
very often they're super kind and polite and complimentary and, "Can I touch your hair?" And it happens so quickly. Have you got something we can say?
Yes. Page 96 of Say the Thing under hair, it
Hair.
says, can I touch your hair? No,
No.
absolutely not. I'm not an animal in a petting zoo.
Yeah.
Or this one says, I'm here to work, not satisfy your curiosity about
Okay.
textured hair. But you could say, oh, I'm here to shop. I
That's
don't
good.
want to be touched.
Yeah, that's good.
Or you could
No, I'm
say,
here to shop. Yeah, because as I
yeah,
say, you can see, I don't know whether you can hear me overthinking this. They're being kind. They're being like, "Your hair is lovely. Oh, it's so amazing." And so I don't want to be like, "Hey, no, hands off." you know. But but at the same
may
time
I?
I'm like, that's not appropriate. You don't go up to strangers and touch their hair. Ignoring the fact that she's black and she, like whatever hair rules there are about black hair, but you don't go up to strangers and touch their hair. It just seems crazy to me.
May I ask, how old is your daughter?
She's 10.
At 10, she has her own opinions, and
Yeah,
you could say, hey, when this happens again, I can respond this way, or this
yeah,
way.
yeah,
How would you like me to respond? Because she might want you to say, hey, knock it off.
yeah. She said to me, I've asked her, and because I said when she was much younger, we were living in Myanmar, and there were no black people there, and a lot of people wanted to stop and ask for photos all the time. And I'm like, "Okay, that's not okay." But I asked her then, "How do you want me to be the bad guy? Do you want me to just say no?" And because neither of us knew how to handle it, and she was like, "Yeah, if you could jump in and just say no." And then more recently with the supermarkets in the UK and just the touching, I think I was a little bit further away from her, and so I wasn't there to be as quick. And I was like, "I'm sorry, I was further away." But I said, is this still how we want to handle it? That I say something, or do you want to say something? But we
Yeah.
haven't quite done the swap over of her saying no. She's just
It
smiling and being polite,
it's it's deeply rude for people to ask to touch her hair. White people don't do that to other white people.
They
They only
don't.
do that to people of color.
Yeah.
And there is a lot, my understanding, obviously I'm not part of the Black community, but it is a big enough issue that like this happens to Black people all the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it is often equivalent to, oh, you look like a fluffy animal and I would like to touch you. I feel ownership from my whiteness over your Black body.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to not even ask, but I'm going to touch you. And so there's, it's considered a microaggression, and like
Okay.
it is a problem. And so they are being rude is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even if their intentions are
Yeah.
not our curiosity, the impact of what they're doing is racist and rude, and it's not okay for them to do that.
Yeah.
And so as much as we want to be sensitive to people's good intentions, they're just curious. They've never seen
Yeah.
textured hair on a child. But like the impact is, this is a racial microaggression
Yeah.
that your child is going to have to deal with, in some cases like weekly, daily,
Yeah.
forever. And it's not okay that that's happening. And
Yeah.
so you are not being rude by saying, hey, please don't do that. She's
Yeah.
not an animal. Don't touch her hair.
Yeah. No, but I don't think I could go that far. I might do one day. One day. Watch this space. But I do think I could say, no, we're here to shop, thank you. Yeah. And just
So
kind of
if
cut it off.
somebody, let's role play. So if I say, oh, can I touch her hair? What are you going to say? So I'm like, oh, I love her hair. Can I touch it? And I'm reaching my hand
Yeah.
out. What do
And
you
you say,
say?
no, we're here to shop. Oh, yeah. So,
You
and
could physically
normally it's
move
fairly
in
clear
front
with
of
the
her
hand.
hand as well.
Sorry, say that again?
You could physically move in
Yeah.
front of
Yeah.
the hand.
Normally put hand up and say, no, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. I,
It's
I
not
was
okay for people
thinking,
to do that.
yeah, I was thinking at some point I've got to show her different ways to be dealing with it so that she can learn that. And obviously, it's never happened to me. Nobody's ever come up to me in a supermarket asking to touch my hair. Like,
Yeah.
it's just so absurd. That
The closest I've seen with white people is tattoos.
yeah,
People, if you have a lot of tattoos, I have friends who are very tattooed, will be out somewhere and someone will do that same thing. They come up and they physically touch them and be like, oh, your tattoo is so pretty. And it's like, it's weird. Humans are weird. And so I think if you sit down with your child at,
yeah,
because 10 is a perfect age for this, and say, hey, had this conversation with Cami, we were talking about
yeah,
this, and let's make our own flashcards. Here's
yeah,
like
yeah.
five or
Let's
six
have
different
two or
things to
three.
say
Yeah,
and
yeah,
to practice together, because if this is happening when she's with you, this is happening when she's not with you.
yeah,
And how does she want to handle it? Because this will
yeah,
keep happening as long
yeah.
as she has textured hair
Yeah.
the
Now
rest of
she's
her
at a
life.
super small school at the moment, but obviously in another year she goes up to the bigger school, which
Mhm.
is 1,500 or so. So she's going to have to be completely comfortable, like you say, about her own boundaries and what's okay and different things. Thank you for letting me pick your
Welcome.
brain. I'm wondering whether your opinion of me, you're like, oh my goodness, she didn't just say no to those people. So
No,
no,
it is really, really normal to
yeah,
not know what to say when you're in an unprecedented situation.
yeah,
There's been things that happen that I don't know what to say. I
yeah,
remember the first time somebody asked me, so I had been married and then I had a miscarriage, and then I had started a new job and they were signing us up for like health insurance or something, and the guy was like, "Oh, so do you have kids?" And I said, "No." And
hmm,
I don't know what possessed this man, but he said, "Oh, why not?"
okay,
And I didn't know what to say at that point. And so I started sobbing, like
okay.
involuntarily. And I was
Yeah.
just like, and so I'm like sobbing and blubbering out this whole story about how I had a baby and it died and it was this whole big thing. And I was super upset. He turned ashen, Like,
Yeah.
he was so uncomfortable, and I don't regret that. I wasn't doing it on purpose to make him
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but I'm pretty sure he never asked someone, "Why not?" if they don't have a baby
Yeah.
ever again. And then I learned, and I went home and wrote down and figured out, okay, somebody says, "Oh, do you have kids?" "No, I don't." And they're like, "Oh," somebody ever dared to ask, "Why not?" Say, "Oh, I had a baby and she died."
Okay. Yeah.
Like, I will make it uncomfortable. They asked uncomfortable questions first. I'm willing to make it uncomfortable.
I think that's one of the things I'm really taking from speaking to you today is that they have they're the ones that have made that first step
Mhm.
in terms of crossing that boundary. And what you're doing is just saying, nope, back. So it's not for you to say that they made that first move.
Yeah.
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 I
You're
suppose
not being rude
yeah,
telling them don't touch your daughter's hair. They were being rude. They
yeah,
started it by
yeah,
trying to touch her hair. And so I don't think any less of you for not knowing what to say in a situation that you've never encountered and it's never happened to you personally.
yeah,
I just know it is a big deal that that
yeah,
happens, and it happens constantly to
yeah,
people with textured hair.
yeah. No, I know that it happens and I don't see it stopping. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So it's and also I think from the book it's interesting that there are multiple ways and it may be useful to have 3 or 4 for different scenarios and different levels of firmness in terms
Yeah.
of absolutely no, or in this situation we can smile and just say no, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's
And
different levels.
having like, so remember we talked about there's silence, there's, indirect,
Extreme.
direct, and extreme.
Yeah.
You could run through all those scenarios with your
Yeah.
child and say, okay, silence would be like giving a weird look and stepping away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Indirect is said, oh no, thank you. We're here to shop.
Yeah.
And direct is like, please don't touch my hair.
Yeah.
Extreme would be, get your effing dirty hands out of my effing hair or whatever.
Yeah, because some people really are quick. It's amazing how quickly
Uh-huh.
they can bridge the gap between.
Yeah.
So there you go. Thank you. Thank you so
So
much
welcome.
for letting me pick your brain. How's the book doing? Let's
So
move on.
good. Oh my goodness. I have learned so much having a book come out because I've been selling info products for the last 7 or 8 years,
Yeah.
making like that's what I do for a living, sell online courses and ebooks and things like that. And so I went into this thinking, oh, we're going to sell hundreds of copies on the very first day. And that's not how that works. And so I had
Okay.
to reframe my mindset that the couple hundred copies we've sold in the first week or so is a resounding success because really people are not just buying. I was thinking of it, oh, it's a $17-18 product, which if I usually sell a $17-18 product, I can sell 1,000 of them, right?
Yeah.
Really quickly. But this was, oh, it's a 10-hour time commitment or more, depending on how fast people read.
Hmm.
And when I've done courses and content that is a 10 plus hour time commitment, I do sell less of that
Yeah.
proportionally because it is a larger commitment. And so it's not just the price, it's the energetic exchange. And so we're at about 300 in sales, and I was hoping that in the first year I want to sell like 15,000 copies.
Okay.
That's in my contract, says if you hit this number then you get an extra bonus. And then I talked to my the team at Hay House who published my book, and they said, that's like a stretch goal. If you sell 5,000 copies,
Hmm.
that will be amazing and we will think you are an amazing success. And I'm over here like, 5,000? Like, if I sold an ebook, or my flashcards, and I only sold 5,000, I would be very irritated.
Yeah.
Like, so the numbers are different, but flashcards is like, a 12-page PDF. Like, it's not the
Right.
same thing. And so, yes, the book is doing well. I've gotten pictures of it in bookstores and libraries, all across the US and Canada, and it's in the UK and Australia. And I went to see it in the bookstore myself just 2 days ago. Like, it's been really,
Yes,
really
I
fun.
saw the photo. I saw the
Yeah.
photo. Yeah, that was really great. Yeah. All those first experiences. I'm glad you're stopping and enjoying that though.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So
been
so
really
well done.
good. And I I'm already working on my next book,
Okay.
and I'm having fun with that. And because
Boundaries again or
it's
more?
specifically about, so the reason people set boundaries, I believe, is to keep in our lives the people and relationships we want. And so the other area where I see people not having scripts is, what do you say when somebody is like pouring their heart out because they're having a bad day and you are not in a headspace
Yeah.
to talk to them about
Yeah.
that. You're not in the space to hold space. Or let's say somebody wants to talk about their fertility journey and you are having your own fertility stuff, and
Yeah.
like you can't listen to them talk about that because of your own thing. And
Yeah.
so, or you want to support them but you're like, I don't know what to say. And so it's scripts and phrases for holding space,
Okay.
and the kind of the six developed skills to allow you to be a good friend and a good partner, or just person to hold space for others. So that's what I'm working on. It's really
That
fun.
that's good. Yeah. And what do you, how do you work with writing? Are you super disciplined and in terms
No,
of your writing? Yeah.
no, I do nothing until the mood strikes
Oh,
me, and then I do a lot, and then I do nothing until the mood strikes me.
yeah. And sorry, just going to jump back to something you were saying about the flashcards, I think you called them. Is that something you have on your website if people were interested in different flashcards? But it's the
Yeah.
same kind of thing of having scripts and
Yes, it's 101 boundary phrases,
right.
and they are flashcards you can print at home, and they are, here, I have a whole little pile. So
Oh,
this is the color version. They also come in black and white. And
yeah.
so this was an early draft. That's why they're all funny looking. But
Yeah.
basically, they say things like, I'd appreciate it if you'd listen to me for now and wait to share your solutions till I ask you for them.
Yeah.
Or I want to let you know what's going on, but I'm not ready for any advice just yet. And there's
Yeah.
101. I went through my whole collection and made 101 flashcards. And my goal is that people develop their own boundary vocabulary. And as
Yeah.
you learn these phrases, just like learning a new language, then when you're in a situation, you can kind of mix and match and combine and be like, oh, yeah, I do know what to say because
Yeah.
I have a foundation of boundary language. So the flashcards are $10. You
Yeah.
print it yourself at home, and easily accessible. A little bit less of a time commitment than
Yeah.
than a book.
I mean, I can see if somebody has English as a second language and is like, "Oh, I just wanna be getting, you know, improving my English and getting better at speaking," I can see that they might wanna focus on that. Most of the people that I've actually worked with, though, are gonna like the book. They're gonna
Yeah,
like the explanation and their English is good enough to be understanding all of that, and I
yeah,
think as I say, the people I've worked with tend to be, they've got multiple degrees and things like that. They're used to having a more in-depth conversation and
yeah,
see your examples and then say, "Oh yeah, and I can add on that and work because now I understand her theory and her thinking
yeah.
about that." But no,
Well, and I think the flashcards came about because I'm making videos with phrases, and people are
yes,
like, "Do you have somewhere where all these phrases
yes,
are in one place?" And yes, I do. You
yes,
know, and then
yeah,
the book is like the next step beyond that. So if you're not quite ready to commit to the book, the
yeah,
flashcards are great. But
no,
if you're ready for the
yeah,
book, the audiobook especially is phenomenal, if I say
yeah.
so myself. I had so much
Did you
fun
say?
recording it.
I was gonna say I haven't heard the audiobook, but I heard you say you've been doing different voices. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah?
Well, because it got tedious. I don't want to just read the same thing. And so if they're like,
Were you pretending to be the other person saying
yes,
something, like, funny?
yes.
Okay.
When they say like, "Oh, can I touch your hair?" No. No,
Yeah.
you can't. We're here shopping. Like, so I had so much fun. Like, oh, you'd be
Yeah.
so pretty if you didn't have that acne. It's like, that is not a helpful or kind thing to
People
say.
say
Please
that.
don't mention my acne again. So
Yeah.
yeah, I had a
It's
lot
in
of fun with it.
yeah, it's interesting. Earlier, you used the word jerks about people being jerks, and I read a book. I can't remember who the book was. I think it was about somebody who'd worked for Netflix, and I think
Hmm.
they've got sort of policies about in-house about, but they particularly use the word jerk about if somebody's been a jerk at work. And when I read the book, I was thinking, I was made to feel when I was in the workplace, I was made to feel like I was being too sensitive. But clearly, other people are spotting that these are being jerks. They're
Yeah.
being like that passive aggressive, being kind of snarky about you and different things. And it was really interesting for me to think, yes, maybe I'm being too sensitive about it, but other people are spotting it. Some people are being jerks in the
Yeah.
workplace and need to be told.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and I also think that your sensitivity is a beautiful gift. Like, wouldn't you
yeah.
much rather be too sensitive than insensitive?
Yeah, I think I'm working things out recently. I don't have you ever done the Big 5 personality trait testing? Have you ever done that? So, one of the things they were saying was about openness to other people, and they kind of associate it with creativity, and I was very high on that. And I was thinking, well, that kind of makes sense that I've been seeing it as kind of a negative that I'm so open and that I'm listening to other people's ideas. And especially if I think that they're an expert, I'm like, I'm listening and I'm valuing it. And I was like, but that feels like a negative because I'm losing me in terms of my
Mm,
grounded. That doesn't feel right. I'm jumping into their idea and saying that's the right way to do it instead of saying I'm listening and I want to understand completely what it is, but I'm probably going to have 2 or 3 ideas before I decide on what is the right course of action for me.
I see, I think that's a superpower. Like, the
I'm
ability
hoping,
to
I'm
put
hoping.
yourself in other people's shoes and really immerse yourself in their perspective,
Yeah,
almost like you said, to the point of losing yourself for a moment. Doesn't mean
yeah.
you're gone, but you can embody their way of seeing the world, and then when you step back out of it and say, "Okay, like,
It's
I
the
fully
stepping back.
understand that."
Yeah. Yeah, it's the stepping
I
back.
love that.
I love being in I really wanna I want to be able to articulate where they're coming from as well
Mhm.
as well as they can. I really want to understand them. Like you, I like people. I want to
Yeah.
understand them, but I have been putting sometimes their experiences, especially if they come across and they communicate certainty,
Mm.
because that is because but I think this is one of the things I noticed from doing that Big 5 personality is that you don't necessarily, if you have that openness, you don't necessarily communicate or feel that certainty because you are open to, there may be information I don't have.
Yeah.
And I think, and
I
so I'm trying to ground myself again. Yeah.
I think I value that. So my partner is that same way. I am not
Yeah.
that way. I have really something I struggle with is narrow thinking. I think it's a side effect of growing up in a cult, and that it's like there is one right way to think. And so when I met my partner and I discovered this human who has this amazing ability to really understand other people's perspectives, I was like, "Ooh, I mean, I don't necessarily think I'm narrow-minded, but I'm very sure of my ideas. And this is a wonderful human who could probably argue any side, because they understand it. And I think there's such a beauty in that.
Hmm.
There's a beauty that you're adaptable, which is very, very necessary in our current, like, ever-changing world. The other thing to consider, I don't know if you've thought about this, is we're experiencing unprecedented problems. Like,
Hmm.
the issues that we have never existed on the planet before. There's never been a trash island in the ocean, like, to the point
Hmm.
that we have at this point. Like, how do we solve that? I don't know. And so I think it's people like you who can gather all of these different personalities, all of these different perspectives because you get them.
Hmm.
And that's all that humans want, right? We want to be understood. Like, you're the glue. Like, you bring it, like, you make it all work.
Yeah.
And I think that that's
Yeah.
beautiful and necessary and valuable. And I love that you love people who are like, these are my sure ideas. There's this
Mm.
piece, but, like, those pieces don't all fit together without people like you. Like,
Yeah.
your role is to understand all of the pieces. And I
Yeah.
think that's powerful.
I'm writing that down. My role, understand all the pieces. Thank you.
You're welcome. Because,
Thank
like
you.
I said, we have unprecedented problems. We need
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to be going to think away and thinking about that, but I want to be super respectful of your time. I'm so grateful that you've given me your time. Before you go, are you doing public speaking or events, or available for that if people want you to come to their events? Or
I do. I am pretty picky about where
okay.
I go. It has to be something that like makes my heart go,
Okay.
yes. So it's because I don't really like traveling. I'm a homebody. I would rather
Yeah.
be home. And so I think that uh, there's a magic and there's a power in live events. And I've taught classes, and I've spoken at
Yeah.
events and all of that. And it's a different magic than through a computer screen. And so I do both. I'm happy to
Yeah.
do both. What I do think is funny is I meet people in person that I've only known through the computer, and they go, "Oh, you're really tall. I'm not that tall. I'm 5'9". Like, so I'm not like
I'm
super
5'1",
tall.
so
My
you're
sister and
tall.
my family's taller than me. But like I have immense presence in
Yeah.
person, but on camera like this I come across as really cute. And so I think people think I'm smaller, and then I show up in person and I'm like, "Ta-da!" And everyone's like,
Yeah.
"Oh."
Yeah. But I think so.
So,
So
if
would
you
you say that
invite me to speak in person,
yeah. So would you say you're focusing more on doing the interviews and the different podcasts? Because I mean, you're trying to get your message out, aren't you? You're doing the TikTok, you're doing you.
yes, I'm definitely doing my PR person called it podcast blitzing, but basically it's
Okay.
like a podcast tour, because our options were I could travel around the country to do an in-person book tour, but as a first-time author that's not always
Yeah.
very effective, versus I could do a podcast tour from my house.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what we're doing. So if
Yeah.
someone has a podcast they want to interview me on, I love them. I
Yeah.
love to be
Reach out
interviewed.
to you. Yeah. So where can people find you?
I am at camiorange.com. I'm also on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube.
Yeah. And we're going to put the links below and put the title of the book, say the thing, and we're going to, so that people are super clear about how to find. And I think I wasn't sure because it's my first time doing these interviews, but I think people can get to know you from being online and doing this, and they can. I think they would have a pretty clear idea about who you are, and the clarity of the scripts and the value of that. So thank you and thank you for letting me be really specific and selfish and talk about my own problems. Well, like the own particular
I don't think
situations
that's
that I'm
selfish.
in. And I'm really grateful you chose the page numbers as well and read things out so that people know it is in the book. It is exactly there.
Yes. This has been so delightful. It has been
Thank you.
so I've always admired you, like connecting with you on Facebook and seeing what you're creating in the world. And so it's fun to get to spend some time with you. So thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. And I'm gonna hit, if my mouse works, I'm gonna be hitting end. But thank you again. Good luck. Good luck for the book. Take care. Bye.